Okay, I'm going to talk about something, hopefully briefly, about wind and solar that is completely misunderstood. First of all, wind and solar, as it's come to pass, has already driven the energy transition. We've already transitioned. It's not something for the future. It's in the rearview mirror. And the energy transition is a good story. It's a good American story. As we sit here today, wind and solar power most of the country, most of the time. Specifically, um, uh, nearly the entire western part of the United States. Let me just take through some numbers. South Dakota, 92%, 60% of which is wind. Iowa, 83%. Nebraska, 74% wind. Kansas, 74% wind. New Mexico, 67% wind. Wyoming, 57% wind. Oklahoma, 54% wind. North Dakota, 51% wind. Nevada, 46% wind and solar. California, 43% wind and solar. Colorado, 43% wind. Texas, 34% going to 40% wind and solar. So we already here in America produce abundant renewable power. We already know what it costs. We already know what the impacts are to the grid. And let me help you out. It's reduced cost and created jobs and local economic benefit. This is a huge, huge, and really unimaginable success story. And what I'm going to focus on here in the next few minutes is just the reliability of this wind power. There is a misconception that if you have a wind turbine somewhere, 10 miles away, you have to have a fossil fuel a power plant in backup for when the wind doesn't blow. That just is not the case. And I'm going to take through some very specific examples where I go through and just kind of demonstrate very granularly that that's not the case. It's primarily not the case because it misunderstands when we need the power. So the main thing that changes every day is not when the wind blowing or not blowing or it's sunny or it's not. The main thing that changes every day is the load. The load goes, it can go from, in Sacramento, it can go from 1,000 megawatts to 2,000 megawatts and back to 1,000 megawatts, for example, where it's really hot like that. So um, the other thing that's misunderstood is we've decades ago connected ourselves to systems that are complementary. Let me give you an example. Southern California has for decades been connected to Northern California and importantly, Oregon and Washington State, where they need the power in the winter. Well, in Southern California, you need the power in the summer. So there's a natural efficiency that's created to help these grid operators manage the fact that some of these resources are intermittent. And on some level, it really doesn't matter how or why. It just is the way that it is. Like I'm not making this up. I'm not saying if we put 85% of wind in Iowa, then it's going to be okay. No, we already are doing it, and it's already okay. So, um, like it almost doesn't matter why. And it's been okay for a long time. Iowa's an earlier adopter. They've had a high wind penetration rate for 15 years. So I hear all the time that America needs reliable energy. Well, kind of what I'm saying is already half of the entire western part of the United States, most more than half the power comes from wind and solar. And we're saying it's already reliable. So it's not only the cheapest source, it's a reliable source. And where you have wind and solar flooding the market, like we do in many of these states, what's happened is the cost of power has gone down and the reliability's gone up. And I'm not making this up. Like you can go online and ask Rock. It's not there are plenty of references to substantiate exactly what I'm saying. I'm going to share a document and I'm just going to tick through it. I don't want to take a lot of time. So I'm going to share. I don't want to do that. I want to share. No, you'd think I know how to use this. Okay. Well, I'm sharing. So how much does our energy come from renewables? Good question. You see this chart here, all that, anything that's kind of orange to red, 50% of the power is coming from renewables. You're looking at North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, um, uh, Wyoming. And I tried to develop some solar plants in Wyoming years ago. Like it was a struggle to start. New Mexico, Portland, Texas, California, Nevada. So pretty much everywhere where there were not regulatory impediments to the growth of wind and solar, like there were in some of these places, it just overtook. It became the dominant source of power, and it wasn't because of climate change, it's because it was the least cost alternative and a reliable alternative. So we already know what happens when 40% of the summer days power in Texas is provided by wind and solar. It's happening every day. It's happening today as I'm sitting here talking. Now, the other thing that kind of, oh, by the way, there's 9 countries that get between 35 and 70% of their power from wind and solar. Like it's not just here in America. Denmark, Djibouti, Spain, Germany, Uruguay, UK, Lithuania, Ireland, Portugal. China builds out 10 times more solar per year than we have here in America. They're building a crap. They're building it. It's their primary new source of generation, and that's why renewables this is by 2026. So this is next year, by the way, will be the dominant source of power in the whole world. So that's because it's the cheapest and it's reliable. Now, these power markets are hard to generalize because every market is very specific, and different markets maintain their reliability in different ways. And the other kind of problem is um, the people who just talk about this stuff, reliability and power grids, they're electrical engineers. Number one, they don't agree with each other. And number two, they talk in a language that's incomprehensible. But I'm just going to kind of chop through this and look at some results. So, um, so, so I talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about Iowa. 83% of the generation last year was wind. They've having wind power in Iowa for 20 years. So they've tried it, and now it's 83% of all the generation. Iowa's dominated by Warren Buffett owned Mid-American Resources. And these people are making the least cost all in choice. And you can tell that. And so let's just go say, Chuck, why could you possibly say that? I'm just going to read from Mid-American Resources' own report, which states that this is what the report says. The state's pro-renewable policy allowed Iowa to be an early adopter of renewable generation technologies. It's true. has been a key competitive advantage for the state's economic development efforts and directly resulted in retail rates that are 26% lower than the national average among investor-owned utilities. The result of the 20-year investment in renewables is more than 3,400 wind turbines in operations across 32 Iowa counties, positioning MidAmerican as the owner-operator of more wind energy than any other rate-regulated utility. Now, that's not going to be true pretty soon because Florida Power and Light is building a lot of solar plants in Florida right now. For years and years, they took the position that somehow Florida wasn't sunny. It wasn't a great place for solar plants. Couldn't possibly have solar plants interconnecting to our grid in the Florida Power and Light Company, and then you turn around and all of a sudden, like a third of the power in Florida is coming from Florida Power and Light owned solar plants. Um, this focus on renewables has created a shift on how energy is generated. In 2023, wind and solar accounted for 60.5% of the company's own energy production. So now you go look at the roadmap for the future, and it's all about renewables. Now, yes, these people don't want the lights to go out. They have gas combined cycle and gas simple cycle plants in their plan as well. But as we sit here today, you go look at 2005 and renewables was 7% wind, and now it's 61% wind. There's a reason for that. Wind won. I'm not saying it's going to win in the future. Like this already happened. I have to tell you, these results are surprising to me as someone who's been in the power business for 35 plus years and many years in the wind and solar business, as well as the gas turbine business. Like I never would have, if you would have come to me in 20 years ago and said this was going to be the outcome, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. So let's look at Texas, for example. Texas is easy because there's a power grid called ERCOT. Most of Texas is in ERCOT and is very observable. So, and it's not connected very well to anything else. So you're looking at kind of a science experiment. Well, um, what happened? I mean, I thought the Texas grid was headed off the rails in 2022. I wrote about that. I said, look, we got a big problem here in Texas in 2022 because we don't have enough power and bad things are going to happen. Well, bad things didn't happen. And they didn't have enough power, but guess what? They built a ton of wind and solar in 23 and in 22, 23, 24. They're building a ton right now. And so what's happened? Prices have gone down from about $200 a megawatt hour down to $70 a megawatt hour, down to 2024, $34 a megawatt hour. The difference between 70 and $34 a megawatt hour is $18 billion. And so the other thing that's happened, and this is kind of surprising, and you just can see all this wind and solar, like what's getting built in Texas. Well, wind and solar. What happened when you built wind and solar? These are annual numbers here, right? So 2020 was COVID. Then we came back from COVID, had a huge problem, huge shortage in 2021 in Texas, and I would say it was even there in 22. And the power price went way up. And the cost of reliability went way up. Like they were running out of power, so they had to go contract it for anybody wherever they could get it from, and probably pay people not to use the power. Like this was very expensive problem, a $10 billion a year problem actually. And so what happened in the wind and solar came online, price went down. The volatility went down. You see the kind of the 2023, that's this year here is the very typical Texas pattern, low price in the summertime, high prices, and then, back down again. And so that's gone. It's just low. And 2023 was $34. I mean, I checked the Texas power market routinely, like it's going to be below $30 for 2025. And for sure, it was 34% of all the power in Texas, by in Texas, I mean in ERCOT, was renewables in 2024. We're going to go through 25, and it's going to be 40%. So what happened when we flooded the market with renewables? Well, the price went down. And if there's a shortage, the price doesn't go down. Like there are indicators of lack of reliability, of not being able to supply demand when the wind stops blowing, for example. And those indicators are high prices, high volatility, and the grid having to spend money on the grid operator having to spend money on these reliability adders so they can go cover the need. You're seeing that. You're seeing every single element of that is gone down. Now, um, that doesn't mean that the wind and solar can provide 100% of the future needs in Texas, mind you, but it means they certainly can provide a lot, and even more than they're providing right now. So let's go look at. I just pulled this off the ERCOT thing today. This is my point about the next forward couple days supply and demand. If so, the thing that moves up and down during the course of the day, it's not when the wind's blowing or whatever. It's when the load comes. That's what's changing. And um, look at this system-wide demand chart here. Low load, high load. The thing that changes in the day is demand. Now, this is the combined wind and solar for today, just the day I randomly pulled it off. You see, the wind's going to provide some, the sun's going to come up, solar's going to provide a bunch, and combined, they're going to provide plenty of power. And so you just go look at yesterday, which is this fuel mix for yesterday, just the random Friday before I did this. Wind and solar peaked out at 45% of the total generation in the state. And so the sun comes down, they turn the batteries on, the demand drops way down, and all's well. So that's how this works. Like it's not just one wind turbine and one house. So there's not one load and one generator. It's all this big interconnected system. And the grid operators in Texas, for example, are pretty good at managing this. And in Iowa, at Mid-American, they're smart guys. And we're going to see in California, there's no shortage of IQ managing this either. So in California, what happens is you see these reds are the peak demand. And sure enough, there's all these systems, all these markets in the West that are all connected to each other. And there's California, and you see that the California reds are Southern California. Spare you the trouble of reading this. And all the reds that peak in the winter are all the areas to the north, right? Northern California and to the Pacific Northwest. So in the winter, we're sending power north. In the summer, we're sending power south. So we can manage the intermittent resource, not without a problem. These people spend a lot of time and money figuring this out, but they figured it out. Frankly, I'm kind of amazed they figured it out. But you look at it, you look at this is for how they get through a day, because there's changing supply and changing demand. And so to balance that, they're using batteries, that's the red, and sometimes using hydro, that's the blue. So in California, they're not even using coal to ramp up or ramp down, or they're hardly using coal at all. And they're not even using the gas turbines to ramp up and down. They're doing it predominantly with batteries and hydro. And you can see, well, geez, this must create this system to be unreliable. No, it's not at all. These are the amount of days and money that they're spending on reliability payments, contracting for units that they otherwise wouldn't be running to be available. And just look, so this is 24 and then a bunch of days, 25, 0. This is 24, bunch of days, 25, 0. This is 24, bunch of days, 20, 25, a lot less. And the same thing with the other reliability products. So what you're seeing is we're flooding the market in California with solar and batteries predominantly and wind. And they already had geothermal. They already have some nukes, and they have hydro. And so what's and they have the connection to the Pacific Northwest and to the to the west, like to Las Vegas and the Western United States. Um, it's importantly to New Mexico, where there's a lot of excess wind power. So how are they managing this? Well, they're not turning fossil fuel plants on. We just proved that this is right from their the Cal ISO's first quarter 2025 report. That's not happening at all. They're turning on the batteries and they're spilling more hydro. So different markets achieve different and this is kind of the California day. So this first quarter 2025, what do you see? The gas plants, the hydro plants. You see the batteries when they need the batteries, and you see a lot of solar and a lot of wind. So is it surprising this works so well? Yeah, right. Surprising. Is it working so well? Yeah, it is. So I just gave you three major examples, right? The heart of the wind belt, that's what we call that, the wind belt, the Iowa. Uh, I got to tell you, I've been to some of these windy places in the wind belt. And you get out of your car, you better hold on to the door because otherwise it's going to get caught by the wind and rip right off. Um, so it's a little hard to imagine just how windy it is in some of these places. Pretty windy. Uh, and so we've looked at three different the wind belt, the island of Texas, big island, but it's a good case study. And then the very interconnected case, which is California. So these are places that have wind and solar between 40 and 85% of all generation. And the same thing happened in every case. Lower cost, lower volatility prices, and high reliability, and lower and better reliability than the pre-existing condition. So we don't really have to imagine or forecast anymore what happens when you add a lot of wind and solar. We already know you get low cost, you get reliability. Now, I'm perfectly willing to confess that these results are surprising, but the results and the outcome is observable. This is what we've observed. Um, and so to me, wind and solar are clearly an important American natural resource, which is really a very critical element of how we've already achieved energy and independence and dominance. We already are the number one oil and gas producer in the world. And we already have high penetration of wind and solar. Now, we're definitely losing this energy, the renewable dominance equation to other countries, and specifically China and India. But that's kind of for another day. But when I hear we need reliable power, it can't possibly come from wind and solar. I'm not sure. Like when you turned on your light bulb in North or South Dakota or in Colorado, that power came from the wind. So it didn't go out. You flicked the switch and it went on. And so when I hear that, particularly from people who are from North and South Dakota and Colorado, I'm like, how can you possibly say that? Just don't you know where the power came from? That this power is your own house. So I have more to say on this, but I'm going to keep this strictly focused on this reliability issue and deal with some of these other tangential issues later. Thanks for listening.